Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Val.
That's a little slow there, Tracy. Getting back in the groove of things here.
Am I on a log? I sounded like I hit it right after you. I must be on a lag or something.
Okay. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I'm on a lag.
I feel like we all might be lagging after California.
Yeah. Which, it was like a month ago, but we're still feeling
the effects.
That's true. We are back from our 10K in California in Disneyland. We survived. Tracy and Val hung back with me to make sure I didn't die, which I appreciated, and helped me get across the finish line.
We're a team.
We did this. We did this.
Yes.
And Tracy's feet hate him, I feel like.
They're okay now. We're back on speaking terms.
Yeah, but because you haven't shared with them what your plans are for April and then the rest of the year, and then if they do that, they'd still hate you. They'd be like, "This guy's gonna kill us."
Yeah, well, the feet are responsible for trying to get the rest of the body in shape. So,
yeah, they carry a big burden. At least in my case, they do. So
stop.
No.
Tracy, I just feel like I'm not quite to the place yet where you can say I told you so.
Right.
But I'm still running, and I plan on running more with you. And I think all three of us plan on going back next year for the 10K. At least I know I am.
That'd be awesome.
So, but yeah, I'm actually, I think I'm almost to the point where I don't have to talk myself into running every day. Not every day, but most days.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
And my brain is finally getting to the point where it's like, why do you do this? You hate doing this. Why are like, it's not saying that anymore. So that's good.
Well, that's good.
I'm starting to tackle like the brain, because it's a mental game, right?
Oh, totally.
Like you can have your body trained, but if you mentally can't get yourself there, you can't do it.
Well, and there's going to be days where your body or your mind just doesn't want to do it. Like I did the Thanksgiving half, and like 3 miles in, I was like, I'm just going to call an Uber and go back to the finish line because today's just not the day. And I had to like force myself to get through with it. And then on the marathon route, I had a fun day, surprisingly.
Yeah.
All said and done. So, yeah.
Jake,
but it is such a mental game.
Yeah. And Jake, I think one of the most fun things about running the Disney 10K is like all the people that are trying to do the same thing and the fun outfits, and they're all running past us, and we're telling them, like, as we run past them, like, you got this, you can do it. Like everybody wants everybody to make it, which was really cool. And sometimes I got a little teary about it,
When we came through the castle in Disneyland and we came across the lady who was struggling through it, and she said, and she was in tears when we got to her. Do you guys remember? And we thought she was just feeling discouraged or whatever. She said, "No, this is further than I made it last time." And so this was her second go around, and she had been swept and she had a big knee brace on, and she'd had some
knee brace was huge
and stuff. And so it was stuff like that was really inspiring, that keeps you going, because it's like, okay, we told her that she could do it. I guess I can do it too. So I better.
And she didn't have a team. She was there. She just wanted to do it, which was so cool, because like we had each other, and we're like, "Hey guys, in the first bit, Tracy's like, okay, everybody run." So, we're running. He's like, "Okay, stop." And you really like, coached us through.
And Val was bopping to her headset.
I mean, I had Spider-Verse going on there, and I'm like, and they have like all this Disney like sparkly music happening, and I'm like, ooh. Got to do what you got to do.
Like Valerie's like jogging / hip hop dancing. It was fantastic.
It was
you got to do what you got to do.
It's like one of those silent shows, one of those silent dance parties, where everybody's just got the headphone and dancing their own thing. Except
I-
Val was the only one dancing. She was, it was awesome.
I felt like it was a jazzercise jog. I was doing like the jazzercise like jog. Maybe that's my new class. Maybe I could
Jazzercise
There you
jog.
go.
I'll go jazzercise.
Yeah.
Like that lady, that fancy walk lady video that's walking through the park. Have you
Yeah.
Yes.
video? She's all walking fast. I'm gonna do that with a group of people, but it's jazzercise jog.
Yeah.
Wait, I told my therapist I can't turn this hobby into a job, so
Oh yeah.
I'll hand that off to someone else. There's a gift to
There's
whoever.
jazzercise jog. Do with it what you will.
Maybe it's just maybe it's just a group that we all show up together to keep our goals, but I don't make any money off of that. Does that count?
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll put it on Meetup group. I'll put it on a Meetup.
There you go. As long as it's not a profit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you though, the Disneyland 10K is so much fun because you spend so much time in the parks. Like you basically go through the entirety of both parks.
Yeah.
The 10K route for Princess at Walt Disney World just got announced, and you do maybe a half a mile in 2 parks total.
That's stupid.
Like the rest of it is freeway. And I was like, that course is brutal. And people were really complaining about it online. I'm like, if I had signed up for that, I'd be ticked. Like
I don't understand because Florida has so much space to run, whereas Disneyland, I could understand it because there's not a whole lot of space, but the 10K inside Disney World.
It's hard just because they start and stop at Epcot. And so to get anywhere else, that's how you have to do it because they're so far apart from each other. Whereas with Disneyland and California Adventure, you're like right there. But basically you come in by Tower of Terror, you go partway up Hollywood Boulevard, you turn and you're out. You're in the park for maybe 4 minutes, and that's if you're walking. And then in Magic Kingdom, you come in by Imagination, you go out, you go across the park over to Test Track, and then basically you're backstage and you're out. And I was like, whew, at least with the 5K, you get to do all of the countries. You get to do the World Showcase. But
Tracy, all I'm hearing right now is Disney excuses. I feel like
be better.
Just because you've done it like that before doesn't mean that you have to do that again.
Yeah.
So,
and from what I understand, they used to do it they used to start it at like the transportation center and go up through Magic Kingdom and back, and at least you get more park time. But
well, it's weird. It's weird that it's the Princess race weekend and they're not going through Magic Kingdom in all of the races.
Yeah.
Because
you
out of all of the parks, Magic Kingdom is the most princess themed.
And this is the second busiest weekend after Marathon Weekend. Marathon Weekend, of course, because you have 4 races. But from what I hear, Princess, especially if you're trying to get in to get merchandise, like there have been reports of like fights over merchandise and stuff. Like that's one I've never done. I've never done the Princess races, but I look at the courses and I'm like, they just don't excite me.
Well, and I think that's the one advantage that Florida has is that they can do a marathon, right? Because they've got enough limited space where they can do that. But then one of the advantages that Disneyland has is for the shorter races like the 5K and the 10K, you spend a lot more time in the park.
Yeah, you're basically in the park almost the whole time. Yeah.
And that was the thing is we had the beginning outside of the park, and then it was like, okay, just for me, it became easy to be like, okay, I just want to get to the entrance of California Adventure. And we came in through the back of California Adventure, and then you're in the park and you're enjoying the atmosphere in the park, or you can. I was really focused on just trying to keep going, but we went through the Hollywood Boulevard area and then down through Avengers Campus, and it was just that keeps you going, right? And then once we came out of California Adventure, we had one park done. I'm like, that's got to be a good chunk of the race. Now I just need to get across the Esplanade, and then I'm in Disneyland.
Yeah.
And, being able to go through the different lands in Disneyland, because we spent quite a bit of the race inside the parks. And then it was like, then we were at like 4 miles or whatever after Disneyland, and we only had a couple miles left, or less than 2 miles left.
Yeah, less than 2 by the time we got backstage. Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, now I feel dumb if I don't finish because I've gone.
Well, and it was fun too, because like we'd be like, okay, now we need to get to Space Mountain, or we need to get over to the Matterhorn. And so you had like visuals, and about how long that distance is because we've all been to those parks. And so it was like, I can make it to the Matterhorn.
Yeah, I think that's helpful than to just like run at a park, because I don't care about that tree up there. But I sure do care about seeing San Francisco, the lights. We're like, oh, make it to the bridge. That looks really cool, And so, I think those pinpoints are cool. So, it was really neat.
I think for me, one thing that I would do differently is I would probably get there the day before so you can check in and do what you need to do to check in, then run the race that morning and use that day to recover, and then do the parks the next few days, because we did the parks 2 days before, and I mean, it was all day in the park, and then I did the race, and then we had a park day after the race as well. And for me, where I'm at, that didn't work. It was really that last day was really hard.
Well, especially because you had kids that wanted to keep going all over the place. It wasn't like if Tracy and I were like, oh, let's just sit down for a little bit and relax. When you have kids there, they don't want to do that. They want to see everything. Right. So you're at someone else's pace the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Well, but then on the flip side of it, I was glad that we had done the 2 days previous, because Thursday and then Friday until Friday afternoon, the lines were really super manageable. And it was really, I mean, the crowds weren't, Disneyland's never not crowded now. You guys, everybody's got to realize that, but they weren't super bad. But then Friday evening and then Saturday, it was a totally different story.
Yeah.
All the locals were there. And that.
Yeah.
So.
I got to say, though, crossing that finish line with you two is one of the funnest experiences. And that is a core memory. Like, that is something I'm never going to forget. And the best thing, Jake, is we were talking as we're getting ready to cross. We're like, Val's like, okay, do we want to like run? And Jake's like, I'm not running. We're like, okay. And so then Val goes, do you want to hold hands? And okay. And so we're holding hands and we're starting to get there. And we're still probably like, 20 yards away. And all of a sudden, Jake just takes off. He's
like, we're going. And I was like, oh, here we go. It was kind of like a Disney ride when you don't expect it. I was like, that launch. It was great. I wish they would have gotten a picture of my face as you were pulling, because I was like, it was so great. And then I'm like, you don't need to get teary as we're getting there. And then I look over and both of you guys are. So I'm like, okay, we can all cry.
Well, the photographer at the finish line loved it, because he took, 200 pictures of us as we came across and we're hugging and everything.
With the lady right in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was fun with the lady. Right?
Well, and there were a lot of pictures in the park where Jake and I had pictures together, but Val was off doing her headphone dance, so she didn't notice that there was a photographer. So we didn't get as many with Val in the park. We got a few.
But Val was, because of her bopping and dancing, and she was able to go off to the side and get some pictures of a couple of other things.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why, if I do it again, I want to be better and be able to, because that was the unfortunate thing, they had character meet and greets and things like that. And I knew I just didn't have the time to make that happen.
Well, and it's hard too, because in Florida, they have a tiered system. And so it's like you have waves within the corral. And I don't know if it's because there wasn't as many people, but like they launched our entire corral all at once. So we didn't have much of a buffer to begin with.
Yeah.
Whereas I was counting on we'd have a couple of tiers behind us, and they've launched the tiers like every 3 minutes or so. So I'm like, we'll probably have 9 or 10 minutes buffer time. So we could do some of those things. And nope, it was just go.
I kind of want to do the 5K so that we can like have a little fun and get some pictures, and then do the 10K and be like all business. That's what I was thinking. Like, the 5K, we're all, let's get pictures with things and we know we can do it. And then the 10K, it's like, I love you guys, but
I'm going. I'm setting a personal record.
Yeah. but we made it. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was
Fun.
I've got the
And
medal hanging up.
thank you to everybody who donated, helping us raise money for American Cancer Society. Thank you.
Yeah. And
Our
that's
team, the
important.
Disneyland team, raised over $15,000.
Nice.
Or no, 150.
I was going to say, I thought it was way more, but
Like more than 100,000.
either way, yeah.
Or no, I think it was 115. That's what it was. Excuse me. Yeah, it was 115,000 with all the Disneyland.
Jeez, Tracy, could you
Numbers
get
are
it?
not my strong point.
Just kidding. You have a lot. Like you ran 1 million races. You raised money for like 70 different places.
It's hard because the 150,000 is how many miles Tracy ran that month, and then this is how much dollars were raised. It's a lot of numbers to keep straight, and they're all way larger than they should
And
be.
I'm not a numbers guy, so
Yeah, not way larger than they should be. I'm glad that we raised what we did for American Cancer Society.
Yeah,
so.
every dollar is awesome. So thank you.
And so we're going to go from the happiest place on earth to the second happiest place on earth, and that would be a boarding school in the 1970s where you're there over the holiday break.
Okay, so right off the bat, though, I want to ask a question before we get into the movie.
Okay.
Is this a movie that happens during Christmas, or is this a Christmas movie?
That's a good question.
So,
like Die Hard, is it a movie that happens during the holiday season or Christmas, or is it a Christmas movie? We're going to put that aside and not argue about that because we've done it, but this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, if you're getting into it, I think this is a movie that happens at Christmas time. And I think the reason it happens at Christmas time has nothing to do with it being Christmas, but they needed a time where there would be a reason why these kids didn't go home with everybody else. And they couldn't do it at the end of the school year, and they couldn't do it, when it's just a couple of days break, because I think everybody stays for that. So they had to find a time that made sense, and the holiday break is what makes sense.
I also think that they needed also with the story a reason for Giamatti's character to have to socialize with other people. And the holidays is kind of a time when people are forced to socialize with people, even if they don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I will say this. I will probably put this into a rotation of movies that I would watch over the holidays. Like this, I could see fitting. It's not necessarily a Christmas movie, but I will probably slot this in just because I really enjoy it and it fits the time.
Well, I think with a lot of movies that, in my opinion, and everybody's going to have their own definition for what a Christmas movie is, and that's fine. But in my opinion, the movies that are happening at Christmas time, you can watch them at Christmas. I think it fits. It totally, putting it in your rotation makes sense. But I could put this movie on in July as well, and it wouldn't feel out of place in July for me. Whereas I'm not going to watch Home Alone except at Christmas time, because it's only
I can watch Elf all the time. But I would say, Jake, you're onto something, because I think this movie is a good movie to watch in July, because as you're watching this movie, you're freezing your butt off. At least I was, because it's so cold there. And then it was cold in the theater, and I've got my coat on, and I'm just like, there is no way out of me seeing how cold this is. And then being in here, and it's winter time, like make sure if you're watching it at home that you get your blankets ready.
Get your favorite blanket. Yeah.
Because it makes you feel cold because of how cold it is there.
Yeah. And since we live in Utah, we know what snow is and how it works. And so often in movies, you're like, that's so not real. Yeah. And this is legit snow. Like they filmed it in the wintertime in January, and then they would use snow machines to kind of like fill in any gaps, but they purposely waited until January to shoot this thing, because
everybody on that set was freezing their toes off.
Yeah. And you could tell.
Well, and then when they say they're turning the heat off in most of the buildings in the school and everything,
and it gets worse.
Then it just mentally adds to the coldness.
Right.
The air conditioner goes on in the theater, and I'm like, well, this is not a 3D. I don't have to have all the sensory aspects of this film.
They wanted you to be immersed in the experience, so they said,
We're all in there with our mittens, and you can see our breath.
Well, it's because there's not a lot of action for the D-box seats, so that they had to bring in
Oh my
the
goodness.
cold air in order to, yeah.
Those stupid D-box seats.
You know,
Let's
what
get
if
in
you
really quick to the cast, because as we were putting together, we added a new category this year for the Utah Film Critic Association, and one of the categories was ensemble cast. And this ensemble cast, from Paul Giamatti to Dominic Sessa to Divine Joy Rudolph to Carrie Preston, even, which we don't see her in movies a lot because she's more of a television series person. Like, everyone in this film, to me, brought something to the film, even if they were only on screen. You know, like some of the boys at the school, we only saw them for maybe the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the movie, but it all made sense, right?
I think that was, I agree. I think one of the things that I was kind of disappointed in initially, and then as the movie went on, it didn't bother me as much, was that all of the boys except for him got to leave. And so that was the end of the story of the boys together. Because at first I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be just him and Paul Giamatti. Oh, no, it looks like it's going to be this group of boys. And there could be some interesting stories and interactions that happen there. And then they left, and I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. But then the movie was great, so it didn't bother me.
Yeah. It added to the fact that at the beginning of the movie, he was just this bratty, pompous kid. Like, I'm going to be going and doing this thing, and you guys can all blah, blah, blah. And then you had, like the Mormon kid from Utah. You had, the Asian kid that his family lives all the way on the other side of the world, and then you've got this kid that, we find out that his dad can fly a freaking helicopter in and pick them up.
Into the schoolyard, yeah.
Yeah, but the kid that had been gloating the whole time, our main character, his mom decided that she wanted to go and be selfish in her new life. And that's real. Like, that's a real story. But for him, he had never been put in that situation before, and he felt very alone. And you could feel how abandoned and alone he felt, but then also that the boys around him, his peers, it was also like humiliation at the same time. It was like, I felt all of it.
Well, the boy who plays Tully, this was his first film. Like, to find a kid who can pull off, like, this kid has to go toe to toe with Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
Like, that is a tough ask, and he more than holds his own.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, like somebody that's got to hold their own against another incredible actor. And I think that you can definitely see that from time to time when someone just doesn't have the chops to hang with them. But I also think that really good actors like Paul Giamatti make their
they make room.
They elevate them and help them and make them look good too. I mean, it's
a dance.
Yeah, I agree. And that's not taking anything away from Tully and the actor, but I'm just saying I think that's something that Paul Giamatti can do is elevate the
well, and that says a lot about both of them as actors, is because I'm sure when this kid is chosen for this part and he's like, I'm going to be acting with Paul Giamatti, and the fact that they worked so well together, it wasn't like, here's this character and here's this character. It was so seamless when they were in scenes. And so, that they had to have a good relationship off camera to be able to do this on camera scenes. Like, we've seen it before where they didn't have it off camera. Like, you would never know in Dirty Dancing that they freaking hated each other. So I'm, there are times like that, but I don't see that here.
And then you add in Mary, and the three of them have to move in together.
And
but
I'm sorry that I said her name wrong. It's Devine, not Divine.
Oh, Devine. Okay.
It's Devine. And she is just incredible. And she's been nominated for this part. I love it. I think she's won a couple of awards for this part. And it's, again, I've said it on the show before. Last year was the year of these quiet, well-made, well-written, well-acted movies that were not these big epic, like almost all the movies that I loved last year were these kind of quiet films you
Mhm.
know, that were just so smart, and the acting was so good. And,
Yeah.
you know, the first, when I kind of walked out of the film and I'm trying to think about what I wanted to say about this, I had to let it settle in, because I'm like, I mean, I have kind of seen this movie before. Like, let's point, you know, at this
Yeah.
film where you've got kind of this mentor between a man and a younger man, or like Dead Poet
I did
Society, where
hope.
you've got this teacher, and it's, you know, it kind of in this situation. But in both of those situations, you have, you know, the main mentor character wants to be in the situation, right?
Right.
And wants to be a positive presence. You know, even with Good Will Hunting, he kind of, you know, pushes it to the edge, but Paul Giamatti's character, he does not want to be there.
He does not
He
like
does
people.
not want to, he just wants to be in his office, smoking his pipe, like
Mhm.
not talking to people. You
Mhm.
know, he does not want to be a part of it. And so what I loved about that is they both didn't want to be there. And then they come together, and they're both better humans by the end of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. It it's true. And I like how they stage that, you know, in the beginning where he gets stuck with having to be there and babysit over the holidays, and you find out that, you know, the headmaster at this school is like hates him and he's like looking for an excuse to get rid of him
Yeah.
because he put him through an ordeal with a senator's son that he was like, I
Yeah.
failed him because he didn't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, he
Yeah.
didn't
He
earn
has
the
standards. Oh my
I
gosh.
yeah.
well, he is penis cancer in human form, which is
Yes.
one of the best insults I have ever heard. Like, when I heard that in the theater, I busted out laughing. I'm like, oh my.
There were some good little zingers that he just
Oh,
kind of, you know, yeah.
calling people troglodytes. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
just the script in this movie is just so good. It's so quotable. The line about your brain's a human cesspool and it's a shallow one at that.
Yeah.
The line about how if they find out you wet the bed, they'll crucify you, and that'll be really ironic because you're Buddhist. I mean, it's just little things like that where I was just like, oh man, this writing is so good.
The dialogue was really, really good. And Paul Giamatti does a good job of pulling off those zingers that are elevated, like that are like you wouldn't say it in normal. I wouldn't because
Uh-huh.
I'm not that smart, but you can tell he's educated, well read,
Right.
but also still very snarky.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be devil's advocate for a minute,
Okay.
okay? Because I love Paul Giamatti. But as I'm watching this film, and as people are saying how much they love this film, and he is being nominated for all these awards, and I'm kind of having an issue with some other actors that I feel have done the same roles before. I do feel like Paul Giamatti is really good at being like this grumpy kind of person that doesn't really want to be social with people. This is a role, this is a type of person that he has played before. Not exactly, you
Sure.
know, there, but I mean, if we look at his past roles, he does very, very well in this get off my lawn kind of character.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would agree. But at the same time, this is such an interesting character to me, and he does so well with it. And you just like, I mean, like you could easily dislike this person, but even at the beginning when he's at his grumpiest, there's still something about him that kind of draws you in. And the thing I think is really interesting too is like he does so much with facial expressions. Like he is one of the best at being able to, you immediately know what's happening just by what's happening here. He doesn't have to say a word. And the thing, I don't know how he did the eye thing. Like, and he won't tell. He won't
Oh
say.
yeah, 'cause he
A
had
And
magician doesn't give up his
right,
secrets.
right. And so it's like, so if you're trying to like, if you're making your eye go funky and deliver lines and give impassioned moments, you know, there are times where he's got to be mean and snarky, and there's other times where like when the kid says you realize that none of the teachers like you, right? You should realize that. And there's just kind of this 2-second shot of his face, and you can see like this kind of shock and anger and yet resignation and acceptance. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about what he did in this particular role. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, acting jobs this year, personally.
Yeah, I would agree, and I agree, Val. He's done a role similar to this before, but I also feel like because he's good at it, that's why he was able to be so good at it in this
Yeah.
and do so much better. And you know, it's kind of like, I mean, Michael Jordan was really good at basketball before he won the MVP, and that was like we'd seen it before, but then he won the MVP and it made sense. I don't know. I don't know that Paul Giamatti wins here. I don't know.
I don't think he does.
I
But
don't think he does either, but I just want to, I know some
Sure.
people are saying that. That was one of my first reactions, but then like because sometimes there's a lot of movies last year and the year before where I have to let a movie kind of sit and breathe.
Right.
And this one, there's so much depth that you don't expect when you start watching it, right? You're like, oh, okay, this is going to be, another kind of film where you have a mentor and you have a kid, and then, and then when you get into it and you see all of these different characters that are tying together this trope, I don't know if it's trope, but stereotypical school that if you look at the school from the surface, they're trying to make everything look good and everything moves together. And then when you see Paul's character and you see the kid and you see the lunch lady and you see all of these other misfits that people don't want to pay attention to, they don't want to talk about, and that's one of the reasons why I think the dean wants to get rid of him, is because he doesn't fit in the picture that he wants the school to be, right? And so he tells him, stop talking about the other dean. That's not this school anymore. And so I love all of these little misfits that come together to make this school what it is under the surface.
Well, it's a prep academy that's going to be sending these kids to Harvard and to Yale, and these are future senators, and these are future judges, and these are future doctors. But these kids aren't there yet, and they are kids. And so you have the kids who are smoking marijuana, and they are fighting with each other, and they are misfits, and they don't want to study, and they don't want to, they're just like every other kid, but they're expected to be Martin men, And so I think that that's an interesting thing too, as to how these kids are supposed to be and how they're supposed to fit into society and how they actually are.
Yeah. Well, and I think Paul, and just to let you know, if you haven't seen the film, Paul Giamatti is Paul also in the movie.
Right.
I'm not just like, oh, I know Paul. Paul,
Steve Spielberg.
But Paul, he is one of the only, if not the only, because we don't really meet a lot of the other teachers except for when they're all sitting at, lunch or breakfast in the commissary. I don't know. Is that he seems to be the only professor or teacher there that couldn't give two craps about who these kids' parents are, right? He's like, this is the curriculum. You either come to class and you pass or you don't. Like, I don't care. And the other teachers seem to be kind of flowing along with, do I get along with you? Does, the dean like me? Do the parents like me? Again, he's the misfit in this group of this school has something to live up to, and it needs to stay on that path of living up to that. And if these kids can't cut it, then they don't cut it.
Yeah, but I think somewhere along the way, he goes from being someone who's caring about the standards to caring so much about the standards that he doesn't care about the students either. I don't think until this experience he even realized that he had hit that point.
Yeah.
But totally brings him kind of back, and realizing you got to do both. Care about the standards. You care about the standards because you care about the students and you want them to be successful and you want them to achieve. But I think when we see him at the beginning, not only does he not care about who they are, he doesn't really care about them.
He doesn't care about anything.
He doesn't really care about anything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and then we get Angus that comes into the picture, which is our main character. And there are so many times in the first half of that film where I just wanted to smack that kid. Yeah. Like, when he's running through the school and then he freaking breaks
Oh.
his arm. And then he he makes it seem like all the things that are going wrong during this break are Paul's fault. And I'm like, this happened to you because of you. Like, I just wanted to smack this kid.
He gives the line when they're in the hospital, and he's like, "I'm the one who could lose an arm here." Like, he's like talking about how it's gonna like get amputated. Like, he's acting like it's gonna get amputated.
Like a dislocated shoulder. Like,
and he's like, "I'm doing you a favor. Like you say that you're my dad. This is a favor to you." And it really, like, if you think about it, it is, because if they had to call his parents, who's going to get in trouble here? Not the kid. Like, he's going to get in trouble. He's going to lose his job. He's going to not be a teacher again.
And I read an interview with Alexander Payne, the director, and he said during that chase scene, the kid, Dominic, is that his name?
Yeah.
Said, "Hey, I should do a cartwheel." And he was like, "Can you do a cartwheel?" And so he did a cartwheel, and they're like, "All right, let's do the cartwheel." So he said that's when they learned this kid was super athletic. And so then when they do the pommel horse scene in the gym, and that's the cross the Rubicon, they had to do it 9 times because the first 8 times he did it too gracefully. And they were like, "No, you have to make it look like you're out of control." And he couldn't, like, his body couldn't.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Like, when you know how to do something, to do it like you don't know how to do it.
Well, you practice all that athletic stuff and everything, your body just responds like
Right, exactly. So he's like, so on the 9th take, when he looks like he's kind of flipping over the top of his head, we're like, okay, we got it, we're good. The other thing I thought was really interesting with this one too, in this interview, is he said that they didn't shoot a lot of coverage. Like, they didn't do a lot of insurance shots. So a lot of times you'll do a shot, like a long shot, and then you'll do the scene again. You'll do it in medium shots, and then you'll do it again in a close-up shot. Yeah. And Alexander Payne was like, "I knew what I wanted, and I was going to get it. And once we got it, we moved on. There's no point in doing that," which I thought was really great.
Maybe he needs to have a little, like, mentorship with Snyder.
Yes.
And
yeah, for sure.
You just stop letting him make movies. That's what
I think I'm
for him.
I think I'm pretty much done with Snyder. I watched Rebel Moon, and it was
It was beautiful, though, right? It was the most beautiful,
I didn't even think it was that beautiful.
I thought some of the cinematography was great. But anyway, one of my favorite. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, speaking of cinematography, so this movie feels like it was filmed in the 70s, right?
It does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. It looks and feels like it was made in 1971, where the movie was set. And I was reading about this, and they said there was no way they could shoot on film. They were like, it just, in this day and age, it's just too difficult to find a developer in a lab, and it's too expensive. And they didn't have a huge budget anyway. And so they shot this digitally. Mm-hmm. But what they did is they shot it with all these lenses that you would have used in the 70s. And Alexander Payne, the director, spoke with the cinematographer, and they both agreed there was not going to be any Steadicam. There wasn't going to be anything that wouldn't have been used back in the 70s. And so he's like, we just set things up on a tripod. We set it up on a dolly. We would do optical zooms. And then they did all of the stuff in post-production with the color grading and kind of draining a little bit of the color out of it, because digital gets everything so sharp.
Yeah.
They had to put some of that, the film grain in. They actually had to write an algorithm to make the film grain look like it should look like. They added a flutter, because when you run film through a projector, the film is vibrating. And so they had to add that into it. And it's just the steps that they went through to get it is just fantastic to me. And the way they lit it too, like, he's like, we had to light it as if it was 1970 light kits, and it would have been a low budget movie back in the 70s. So they didn't have big arc lights. So they had these tiny little pieces, and they had to use a lot of natural light. And that, I think, and the fact that you had long monologues and long dialogue scenes back and forth with the actors is also kind of a throwback. We don't get that as much anymore. We have 5 minutes of dialogue running through.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what, to me, elevated the film, and not knowing all of the background behind it, but it was clear that they were shooting it to look like it was made in the 70s. And that's what elevated the film to being like, feeling like it was in the 70s, more than just okay, we got all the costumes and they're all dressed like they're in the 70s,
Yeah.
but we're going to shoot in 4K. It's going to look amazing. It's going to, you know, I think of like Stranger Things, for example. I know that's the
Uh-huh.
80s before anybody comments, but that's in the 80s on
Right.
Netflix, but it's all HD. It looks really good. And so while it's good enough to say, okay, I feel like they're in the 80s, but it also feels a lot like it's just people from today dressed in
Play.
costumes and playing
Yes.
people from the 80s. And this did not feel like that. Like you could almost watch it side by side with movies made from that time period and it would
Yeah.
feel very similar.
Yeah, when they
And
were at the Christmas party, you really feel it because when they
Yeah.
walk into
yeah.
that house, I'm like, this is my house in Colorado. We had, you know, a sound system like that takes up
Mhm.
the whole wall. We had
Uh-huh.
these couches. We had these hors d'oeuvre tray, you know, like anytime you'd throw, like my parents would throw a New Year's Eve or a Christmas party, like it to me, I could smell that house, right? I could feel that
Yeah.
couch.
Yeah.
I just really, that was so nostalgic for me. And I just thought that it's those little nuances, those little details that they did. And that's really the moment where you got to jump inside Mary's world a little bit.
Yeah.
And I loved it because in the beginning, you know, she's a cook, she's in there, she's cooking for these kids every day. We understand the character. There is no question about, you know, what's going on there. And then
Right.
we kind of see her in her little apartment and she's just in there relaxing in, you know, her house dress, you know, and
Mhm.
watching TV and just like anybody else, just
The
relaxing,
Newlywed
right?
Game.
And then we start learning more about her and about her son and how she only worked there so that her son could get this education that otherwise at that time he wouldn't have been
No,
admitted to that school at
no
all.
way.
And
No way.
that school used her as a checking off point. And when we see that the most is when they make her sit at the front row in the church. You have her son's picture up there and
Uh-huh.
she's just sitting there like, I'm something they're checking off here. Like
Yeah.
you can see in her face, you know, they didn't treat her son like he was a part of the team when he was
No
there,
way.
but now he's this hero. She's
Mhm.
usually in the background in this back room where nobody sees her. And now
Mhm.
they're putting her in the front row. And I could just feel the different shades of sadness in her
Yeah.
just by her whole demeanor, which I
Yeah.
just thought, you are good. Like,
She was so good.
just so good. Yeah.
The other scene that I love with her is at the end, and it's such a simple scene when Paul Giamatti has gone into the headmaster's office, and the kid is sitting there, totally sitting there by himself, and she walks by, and it's a wide shot. And this is
Mhm.
why I loved this film so much, and it is such a throwback. This took me back to my film school days because we used to have to shoot an entire scene from one. You had to have all the scene happen from one angle, one shot.
Mhm.
And he's sitting there, and we're following her. The camera pans. We see him. She stops. She walks over. He says, I'm going to get thrown out of school. I'm going to go to military school. She sits down by him, and the camera doesn't change angles. It doesn't zoom. It just lets it happen.
Mhm.
And she just slowly holds out her hand
Mhm.
on the bench. And then he takes her hand, and we just linger for a few seconds. And then we go into Paul Giamatti meeting
Yeah.
the family, and that whole scene develops. But it says so much about that character where she just quietly sits down. She doesn't hug him. She doesn't make a big deal out of it.
Mhm.
She just puts her hand down and he takes it. And that
Mhm.
is just so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yep. One of my favorite shots in the movie is that scene. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. You get a little teary.
And I like it too, because like I said, like Val said, it was such a simple movie. There's not a moment in this film where you're like, there's not a moment where you're like I got to imagine it was hard to market this film because there's not a whole lot where you can be like, this is a feel good. I mean, it is, but you get the shot of Paul Giamatti's face when the kid flies over the pommel horse. That was kind of the iconic shot, but you don't have that really big Oscar moment. You know, you don't have.
It's not an epic movie made for the Oscars. It's not
right.
in any means not a simple movie. It is.
Right.
like I say, it's a quiet film because it's so intricate in how it weaves these stories together, and we still understand them, because we have all seen movies where there's too many character stories and we're like, come on, focus on one because there's too much going on. But each character that it dives into, and it dives into at least 3 main stories, because even when, we get to the boy, we see this side of it, and then we jump into his father's side, which we don't even see that coming, because he makes us feel the whole time that his father is dead.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has to put that facade on because his mother and him do not want people to know where his dad is, because it's all about looks. It's all about who you are, what's attached to you, and everything. And then when all he wants to do is go see his dad. And this is a different side of this character that we see, because he has this tough shell the whole time. And then we find out why.
Yeah.
And I love how Paul's character reacts to what's going on here and really sticks by his side in this moment. And then the mom comes in and she's angry, and the audience is so angry at her for doing this situation, that everything comes together in this moment. And it's just, it was very well thought out, and it's so intricate and so many layers here.
And that scene where he goes to his dad and he's saying, "Hey Dad, I'm doing good in school. I'm keeping my grades up. I'm going to be on the tennis team," and he's talking about all these things, and all he wants is like this acknowledgement from his father. And then his dad looks at him and says, "I think they're putting something into my food." And then they cut to that kid's face, and that moment, I was like,
well, and it's interesting too, when the mom does come and she's furious that they went and visited the father, she makes the comment in there like, well, now he's expecting people to come visit him.
Right.
And that kind of leads to that's the change in him, where it's like, okay, like, and this kid, he realizes this kid's got nothing going for him. Nobody's in his corner.
Right.
So he decides to be in his corner and
Yeah.
not let this opportunity at the school pass him by.
Yeah.
And that final shot, and again, it's like you could have had this big shouting match, and instead it's this quiet anger from Giamatti, where he's like, well, it's not anger at the mom. He is, but he's just like, hey, this was my idea, so on and so forth. And then when he's leaving and the principal's like, this is all on you. I didn't do this. And he calls him human penis cancer. And then he leaves. But even at the end, he just takes the guy's bottle of his prized alcohol.
I love that so
drink it. He swishes his mouth with it and spits it out and drives away. And that's the end of the movie. I'm like, bravo.
Yeah. It is the kind of ending that this movie needs too, right? There's enough closure to that experience and what happened, and you see that he loses his job because of it, and the kid's going to stay at the school, but then you don't get anything after that.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is okay. And
because he's gonna figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and he was exploring all of these places in this history in maps and in books and in paper, and he gets asked like, but have you gone to any of these places? And so everybody gets to have their own thought at the end of movie what he's going to be doing. And in my mind, I hope that he's going to go see where all the history happened. Like that's what I want him to do. Right. And so I like it when you have a movie that gives you enough character and that you care about these people, that then if they leave you with that open ending, you feel complete. Because sometimes we'll get a movie and the director's like, well, I wanted to leave it to your interpretation. Okay, but I don't have enough about this character that I don't care about it because you didn't give me enough. And with these characters, like I can think about where this boy is going to go and what he's going to be doing. And I can think about where Mary, where she's going to be the next year, and I can think about Paul. And it doesn't need to be the same thing that you think about, but leaving it for interpretation when you're given enough is such a good, satisfying feeling for an audience.
Yeah.
Well, and it might be the most throwback thing about this movie, honestly, because we either get filmmakers that try to impersonate that, like you said, Val, where we're going to leave it up to your interpretation. Well, you didn't really give me enough to interpret anything. I don't know what you want me to interpret.
You ran out of a budget.
Or we get it, and they're like, "Don't worry, Holdovers 2 is coming next winter, and we're going to continue the story." Or, we're giving you a Netflix series or a Paramount Plus series where you can follow the adventures of these boys at the school. That's usually what happens anymore today. Sometimes the story just ends when it ends, and you write the next chapter in your mind.
Yeah, or else you have to read the novelization, and then you've got to read the comic book, and then you've got to see,
it's a complete thought from beginning to end. It is a complete thought that's a well-made movie. And I remember coming out of this film and saying there was nothing overly spectacular about the film.
Mhm.
It was a well-made, well-written, well-acted movie. And one of another critic was like, that I think we're hitting a low bar if all we're shooting for is a well-made movie. And I said, no. I remember thinking that about Tender Bar. It was such a smart, heartfelt, well-made movie with good characters, with a smart script. I don't need, it's fun to have movies where there's these intricate stories that you're going up and down and trying to figure them out. But sometimes I just want a movie that tells me a full story that I can sit and enjoy, that gives me more than I thought it was going to give me in terms to story, in terms to, acting, directing. Like, this is a full box wrapped up in a bow movie. I wouldn't take anything out of it. Like most movies, I'm like, oh, you could take like 15 minutes out. This scene, they didn't need that. I don't feel that about this movie at all.
And I love the fact it's 2 hours and 15 minutes. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't feel like 2 hours.
But it doesn't feel like 2 hours. And I'm with you, Val. There's not a scene that I would cut. Everything makes sense, and everything leads to the next scene and leads to the anyway, leading you to the end of the film. Like even the scene where they're at the bookstore and the prostitute offers him a candy cane.
Like it's even that, so great, right?
So and he's like, if you want to go get a candy cane, I'll wait here. It's just the little moments that add to that characterization and the humanity of the film.
Yeah.
Thinking about what you said, Val, I'm thinking there are some movies that to me are like a hamburger, and there are different levels of hamburgers, but I know that's going to be like your Marvel movies, or it's going to be your like Star Wars movie. I enjoy them. They're great, but they're like the popcorn eye candy type of movie, and they still have some substance. There's a difference between a McDonald's hamburger and a Five Guys hamburger, right?
Right.
But then if I want to go out for a good meal and I want to get a steak, I have a different expectation for what that's going to be. And seeing the previews for this, I'm like, that's going to be a steak. That is going to be, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to feel satisfied. It's going to be a different experience than having a burger, but I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it on a different level.
Yeah.
And then there are the movies that you sit down and they bring you the plate.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't even recognize what this food is or how I'm supposed to start or dig in. And I think,
that was Tenet for me.
Yeah.
Like Tenet, I looked at it and I'm like, I should love this movie. I should love what you are presenting me. And instead I'm like, I don't.
Well, you can go see it again.
Yeah.
They're re-releasing it in theaters. Yeah, I really try and stay away from
figuring out a lot of trailers. And
I post a trailer, but I usually don't watch them unless it's going to be like a Marvel movie. However, I didn't watch anything I watched a little bit about Madam Web, and I'm not looking forward to watching that on Monday.
So
but I do try and stay away from it. So the only thing I knew about this movie is that it looked cold and Paul Giamatti was in it. That's the only thing I knew. And so I didn't go in with any expectations except for the fact that I really love Paul Giamatti. So I knew it was gonna taste good, Jake. I just didn't know what level
Yeah.
that was going to be, right? And that was for a lot of films. I would love to kind of have a month of these quiet movies that came out last year, because I would love to talk about Past Lives, which was another
that was so good.
beautiful and quiet film that was intricate and smart and broke some barriers in that type of storyline. I would love to talk about You Hurt My Feelings. It's another one that's super smart, that wasn't loud, that was one of my favorites last year. And then American Fiction was that as well. These are all movies that don't have explosions, that don't
Right.
have these big stars that come in, because as much as Paul Giamatti is well liked, it's not like he's a
not a
Robert
box
Downey
office
Jr.
star.
or he's a cult favorite, right?
Right.
He's
Yeah.
one of those people that if you're in a, you know,
Oh, I
you're
like him.
I
Yeah,
like
when
him,
he-
and
oh yeah, he's
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, and most of the time he's a supporting actor character. The same with
Right.
Jeffrey Wright in, you know, American Fiction.
Mhm.
And so I just loved this year. There were some epics. I enjoyed Oppenheimer, and that was an epic film made in a certain way. This big kind of grand movie that I think was also smart. You know, and then you have Barbie, which is this big flashy movie that was also well written, right?
Subversive,
But
smart.
that's going to pull people when you say you've got Barbie and you've got Oppenheimer and you've got, you know, these big movies, but these other films that are being recognized that don't have any of that, that are so smart and well made. I love the fact that they're being recognized this year.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think You Hurt My Feelings went very far as award season goes, but
Right.
the fact that Past Lives, the
Mhm.
Holdovers, and American Fiction are in there made me really, really happy.
Yeah, I don't think there's a chance really that Giamatti will win. I think that's pretty much a lock for either Cillian Murphy or
Mhm.
Robert Downey Jr. But
Yeah.
if this doesn't win screenplay, I'm going to be so upset,
Yeah.
because this is one of the best screenplays of the year for me, if not the
Yeah.
best.
I don't think it will, but yeah. And Robert Downey Jr. and Cillian are both in 2 different categories.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me. You're
Yeah.
right.
So both
I'm
of
thinking,
them can
I'm
win.
thinking Ryan Gosling and Robert Downey.
We could talk about the Oscars and Barbie, but we
We
probably should.
will. We will have an Oscar episode, whether you like it or not, Jake.
Well, no, right now I don't need. I was thinking as you were talking about Madam Web, I think that would be like gas station food. If we're talking about the food
Yeah,
ranking
yeah.
system, where it's like
That's the
that's
hot dog. That's the
like
hot
you
dog
don't
that's been
know-
on the
you
roller.
don't know how
for
you got
weeks.
here and why
Let-
you're making the decision to ingest this, but you're hoping it will just pass through as quickly as possible, and you'll
This
move
is-
on from the
This is
experience.
the
Just
thing.
make it as smooth as possible.
I think it's going to be a hot pocket going in and coming out. That's what I think it's going to be. Because this is the thing. I want to warn you, because we're almost done with our episode, but I know that it opens on Wednesday, which is Valentine's Day, is that today, Monday, today is when us critics get to see it.
Yeah.
Wednesday
Yeah.
is when it comes out, and we can't even put a review up until Wednesday morning. So
It's
I-
a
Warning. Warning.
it's a
Warning.
stinky, overburnt, over spicy hot pocket, and it's going to hurt going in and hurt coming out.
It's
And the marketing materials. The marketing materials have zero effort put into them. It's Dakota Johnson staring blankly into the distance, and then they put a web around her, and that is
And it
all they
makes
have
me
done for
so
this movie.
sad, because you know how much I love the web movies, but they
Oh,
can't
yeah.
even call Spider-Man in this movie. And
Yeah.
his dark Spider-Man character has existed for a long time, right? But I don't think they can even call him by that name because of the
Why are you
contract
doing-
that Sony has with Disney right now.
Why you're even making a movie about
If you-
Madam Web is just beyond me. Like, who greenlit this?
I don't know. Like, that's the thing, is you've got to, number one, the movie's got to be really, really good. If you're going to take a risk, I mean, I'm thinking like Guardians of the Galaxy is a really good example to me
Right.
of characters that if you told me they were going to make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I'd be like, nobody's interested in a talking raccoon and tree. Like,
Right.
nobody. But it was a good movie,
Right.
and it was marketed well, and it got people to see it, and I'm glad they made the movie.
Right.
That's what you got to do. Madam Web is one of those characters, even more than Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like nobody knows who Madam Web is unless you're like a deep Spider-Man comic book
And
fan.
even then, are you a
And
big
that-
Madam Web fan?
But this is
No.
the thing. I love it. And I talk about this a lot. I love it when a studio is going to have the balls to give us something that we don't know we need. Okay. And this, I think, is a good movie on paper, and they're checking a box with all these female leads and a female superhero, right? But then they put it together and realized what a smoking pile it was. So they decide, okay, well, it's made. We're going to throw it into a time of year where nobody cares about these films on Valentine's Day when people are going to watch the romantic movies. So if it doesn't make it, we can blame it on that.
Yeah, Warner Brothers would have just vaulted it.
Would they have? I don't think they would have. I think they've put out a lot of pieces of poo, but I may be wrong. This is a thing. I may be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I will be the first person to say, you know what? Good job, guys. Good job. But I also think they may have vaulted it, except for last year, they had to stop making a lot of the movies that they wanted to come out this year because of the strike. Oh. This movie was already made, so they threw it in a hole that was empty.
They're just throwing every Spider-Man related villain at all possible that they have access to, throwing it on the screen to try and make money. That's all Sony's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Sony, you're so sucky. Except for when it comes to Spider-Verse.
Yeah, that's the only thing they do well. Absolutely.
And your Spider-Man games are pretty good. So keep making those for the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
So I don't understand this, but we'll see. I think I don't have high hopes.
If you're having to apologize because this movie is much better than you thought it was going to be, or that it's even good, I will eat my hat. I just don't think it's gonna.
Which hat? Which hat are you gonna eat?
Do we get to pick?
Probably one of my Utah ones, because I've got a few Utah hats. But
okay.
Are you gonna put ketchup on it?
I'll tell you what. I'll put the Foo Fighters one up.
Ooh,
that's how confident I am.
You're gonna eat the Foo?
I'll eat the Foo if this is good. That's how confident I am that this is going to be.
I'll let everybody know, because I can't give it like a grade. I can't review it. But if all of a sudden you guys see a Hot Pocket go up on my socials, then you'll know what's going on. If you see a hat go up, get ready, Jake.
All right. Well, there you have it. There's our review of Holdovers. If you haven't seen this because it wasn't one of the big movies, I think it's on Peacock right now. You can watch it.
We gotta grade it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we gotta grade. We're out of practice. All right, Tracy, we'll start with you.
When I first saw it in the theater, I was completely surprised by it. I didn't know much about it, and I didn't necessarily think that I was going to love it. At the time, I gave it an A-. After rewatching today, I'll watch this again. I think my grade was a little low. I'm going to go A. I don't really see fault in this movie.
It's a solid A for me.
And it's an A from me too. So it's a AAA rated.
It's our first 2024 AAA.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I wish I had confetti.
Yeah. And of course, with any AAA rated movie, once we review it and we give it a AAA grade, any of the filmmakers, actors, whatever, are welcome on the show anytime. Anytime. Yep. If we give you all Fs, you're still welcome to come. That's fine too. But anyway, thank you so much for listening, for watching. We appreciate your support. We've got some fun stuff coming up. And until next time, we won't see you at the movies.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been an Age of Geek media production.